Yay! So here we are for another episode of the Becoming Cosmically You podcast. And today we have Dr. Selvi, and this is going to be a really interesting chat because I was reading your bio before, and you've overcome some really pretty heavy health issues, right? And
Mhm.
so let us know, Dr. Selvi, who you are and what you do, where you come from.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Dr. Selvi Rangasamy. I live in New York City, and my journey has been one of overcoming chronic illness. So, when I was in college, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, which is an autoimmune disease of the digestive tract. And I just remember being in the doctor's office and them telling me that I had this diagnosis, and I was like, okay, like, what does this mean? um, it's going to be here for the rest of your life. Because in my head, my, 19-year-old head was like, well, when does it go away?
Mm,
What do I need? Like a course of antibiotics or something? Like, what are we talking about? And it was much more than that. So that was kind of, the beginning of the journey, if you will. Within a couple of years, it just got really heavy. I was in college, and I wound up needing emergency surgery because my large intestine developed a perforation in it. So basically a hole. They don't know why. I'm in my last semester of college and having this really high fever, being admitted. It takes them a few days to figure things out. And apparently, they told my parents that if I didn't get surgery, excuse me, within 24 to 48 hours, that I wouldn't be able to live. So, yeah, that was terrifying, and I was just in this powerful, powerful stage of denial of, no, I'm fine. I have things to do. I got to go finish my semester. I want to go to medical school. What are you talking about? No, like as I can't even stand up straight because the pain is so bad.
mm,
Um, and that first surgery led to me waking up with an ostomy bag, which is a bag on your abdomen and your stool comes out of the bag as opposed to using the bathroom, right? Um, and it was like time froze at that moment for me. I emotionally started to shut down. Physically, it was still a struggle. Continued to be a struggle. I went through more surgeries. There was just like, it was like one thing after the other, and they would try all sorts of medications and nothing really worked. The goal had always been to get to remission, but I never even felt stable, let alone getting to remission, right? And so I didn't even think remission was possible. Fast forward several years later, I wound up having, my nth surgery at this point. And by now the hospital has become this familiar place. I know what the lights look like. I know what the nurses are like, all of this sort of, they know you by name. Like that's when you know you're there too much.
yeah.
And I'm lying on the operating room table at this point. I'm looking at those goddamn lights again. And I'm just like, this is fucking ridiculous. My friends are going and living their lives. Like everyone around me is traveling and doing things and able to eat food without worrying. And here I am having yet another surgery. I was like,
Mm,
something's wrong here. Like, I don't know what it's going to take, but some part of me always knew that I could heal. And I was like, that was the point where I was like, you know what? I will do whatever it takes. I declared, set the intention, made a vow, whatever you want to call it, I didn't even know who I was talking to, but I was just like, I will do fucking anything it takes to heal.
mm,
And that's the moment where things started to shift for me.
mm.
And that was when I started to take ownership, to take empowerment, right? To really be like, okay, what are the things that I can do? Because up until then, I had been told over and over that food doesn't really play a role. That there
Mm,
weren't really
yeah.
any studies on dietary changes, which intuitively I'm like, that makes no sense.
Yeah, that makes no sense at all, even back then.
Yeah. So, and then I wound up making dietary changes and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm starting to feel better. I
Mm,
have less bloating, I have less pain. There's something here, right?
mm,
And so I started to learn to trust myself more and I started to explore holistic health and Eastern medicine and acupuncture and things like that. And I started to understand how to look at the body as a whole. So by this point, I'm already a trained Western medical doctor, right?
mm,
And the way you look at the body in that system is just, it's very different, right? It's parts, it's pieces, if you're looking at inflammation, like in one particular system, you're kind of more focused on that. You're not really looking at a being as a whole, right? Mental health, emotional health, physical health, energy. Like I didn't even know there was this concept of free flowing energy in the body. And I started to learn about that. So I'd go to my acupuncturist office and pick her brain. She'd feel my pulse and she's like, "Are you feeling frustrated today?" And I'm like, "Wait, I know 75 beats per minute. How are you telling me that I'm frustrated by feeling my pulse? Like,
Mm.
what is this, witchcraft? Like, what's happening?" And that started to really, for me, become an education process. And she would explain like how energy is tied into emotions, is tied into physical health, and how all of these things impact each other. And I was like, oh my mind was blown wide open. And that started to become a rabbit hole that I was just going deeper and deeper down. And eventually I wind up finding, the world of spirituality and deep inner work and things like that. And somewhere along the line, I knew that I wanted to not just get to remission, but I wanted to thrive. Like I wanted to live. I've always had this voracious appetite for life, to explore, to try different things, to meet people, to, have different hobbies, right? Travel had always been a big desire for me. And I was just like, I don't want to fucking settle for this not feeling good shit. Like that should be basic, like I want to feel well in my body. And so I stuck with it. And eventually I went from these massive, highly toxic doses of medications, like way overdoses,
Mm.
to getting off of medications entirely and to feeling the best I've ever felt in my entire life. So, now I feel better than I felt when I was in my 20s,
Mm.
and I have more energy and I'm able to travel and I picked up salsa dancing, and I have stamina and I'm working in a career that I love. Like I'm just like, holy crap, like it gets to be this good and even better,
I
you
love
know?
that. Oh my God, I love that. And you know what? Your path has been like so non-traditional, right? To go through Western medicine and then be exposed to all this, like you said, witchcraft. That must have been a real shock to the system to suddenly
Mhm.
realize that it's more than just the pieces and the parts and the books that you've been taught, right? And I love how you were able to really open your mind to become the expansive being that you have done, because a lot of Western medicine is very, very closed in, right? They're like, no, no,
Mhm.
no, you're ill, so you have to take a medicine and that will make you better. But most people know, actually, I say most people, but most people who are awake know that medicines don't always cure, they mask the symptom, right? And so you don't need to be a doctor to understand that, I don't think. But there are still people that don't understand that, right?
Absolutely.
And there
Yeah.
are still people that think that you can be healed and put rubbish into your mouth all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I mean, coming to your first point, right, about Western medicine, there's so much of this focus on, well, the studies say this or the research says that. And my thing is, at some point I started to realize, wait a minute, those studies were never performed on my body.
Mm,
The research does not directly correlate to me. That's like sort of a general-ish skewed picture.
mm,
What about my body? What about my unique system? No one's ever studied that.
mm,
I'm the one who lives in this body, right? Has lived in it since the day I was born. I'm going to be in this since the day I die, right? I'm the expert of that.
mm.
Absolutely.
I
You
love
know?
that. Such a valid point, because I always say to my clients, I'm not a doctor, but what we do is cosmic surgery. And I always say, like, your biggest asset is the body that you're sitting in. Like that's the most technical piece of kit that you could ever wish to own. Not
Yeah.
a pendulum or a set of cards or any other things that people go on about out there, but your body, your heart space is so technical and knows the answers. And one of the things my team want to circle back to what you said, which was so profound,
Mhm.
it's about trusting yourself.
Yeah. That's
That's the
everything.
switch, right?
Yeah. Because, up until that point, I was very much in this paradigm of trusting what my doctor said, or, like believing what someone else said, or anyone other than me knew better what was good for me. And that shift started to shift everything of like, wait a minute, there's a voice inside that's telling me I'm alive for a reason. There's a voice inside that's telling me that I can heal. There's wisdom inside that's wanting to come through if I just stop and listen. And that was the greatest gift of being sick for that long was at some point I started to embrace that stillness,
Mm,
right? With guidance, of course. Like initially I was like, I don't know what this world is. Like I don't know how to navigate any of this. But I had this amazing spiritual mentor, and we still work together today, who started to educate me in the power of that stillness and like, but what is your wisdom saying, right? Like shifting that lens back to me. And I was like, my wisdom, what are you talking about at first? To like, wait a minute, I know X, Y, and Z. Or I get to this point and I'm like, I know I don't need medication anymore. Like I know I'm good,
mm,
right? So that trust is like it's your inner compass.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a GPS, right? You can't. I just I just can't imagine my life without it now. Like,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know what I do without it.
Yeah, for sure. Like once you start to wake that part up, it's literally that. It's like,
Mm,
how did I function before? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Like a zombie, like most of the collective are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. It's like you don't know what you don't know until you know it, and then you can't unknow it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So going back, my team really want to go back to like when you found out you had Crohn's, and obviously like as a 19-year-old girl, that must have been really shocking because at that kind of age, a teenager, you're kind of really finding yourself, right, and you're finding your confidence in your body, and
Mhm.
suddenly waking up and having to deal with a bag, and I'm sure that you navigate that beautifully now because you're used to it, right, and emotionally, but that must have been really hard to deal with emotionally. I'm getting emotional thinking about your emotions back then.
Yeah. I mean, oh, so I mean, coming back to your second point, I actually wound up having a surgery a year later. I was able to have it reversed, so I don't actually have the bag right now.
Oh wow.
But the emotions from that time, like I still am processing some layers of that, because I couldn't process it at that moment in time. My coping mechanism was just to shut off from it, to cut off from it. Like I couldn't look at it. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to acknowledge it. I was just like, if I keep pushing past it,
Mm,
I'll be okay, right? Somehow, if I just like, if I run fast enough and I push hard enough, like I'll get past it. Eventually, it did wind up catching up with me years later.
mm,
How it first impacted me, though, was coming to your point, playing on self-worth, right? I remember couldn't even look at my face in the mirror, right? It was just
mm,
like, you worthless piece of shit,
mm,
pun intended, right? Like, you
mm,
can't even poop right. You can't even poop like a normal person. Like, what the hell, you know? Um, no concept of self-love, right? Believed like I was not worthy of any of that. And that was the navigation system that ran my life for years, decades afterwards, like the choices that I made, the decisions that I made were ruled by that, like settling for less than
mm,
what I'm actually worth, right? What I actually deserve. It took so long to be able to look at myself in the mirror, to look at the scar on my abdomen and be like, this is fucking beautiful.
mm.
It's not a
Because you
damn thing wrong.
survived, right?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Survived, and every day it shows me just how much it can heal,
Mm,
on all the layers. And I think that's when I started to appreciate it more. But yeah, I mean, initially, like you were saying, like I felt dead inside for years.
mm,
Dead, smiling on the outside, but just totally dead on the inside. And
mm,
once I finally started to feel, then all of that started to come up, the grief, the sadness, the anger, right? The
mm,
rage at what had been taken away from me at that point in time, right?
mm,
Um, and how my mind looked at that, right? And working through all of those emotions, the terror, like the absolute freeze response that just hit of just like, what the hell, the trauma, right? Working through all of that over time has led to me feeling so much more freedom and ease and liberation in my body and being like, yeah, there may be lumps and bumps and, what have you on my stomach, but it's beautiful.
mm. Because it's yours, right? And you
Yeah,
own it.
yeah,
I love
exactly.
that. I love that story because I think I feel quite a lot in the collective that a lot of people are going through this like void at the moment where they're feeling a lot of unfulfillment and void in their body. And so
Mm,
I love how you explained how you kind of process that trauma, which is basically the void, right? And you,
absolutely.
you see even really super successful people with lots of money and lots of fame, lots of success, having this void and filling it with things that don't fill them, rather than taking it all out, processing it, cleaning the laundry, and then putting it all back in a more aligned way. But I love that you went really deep. And the thing is, you have to go deep on the empathy and the emotion, because then you get to show up for your clients in that way, right?
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that, you put it that way. It was beautifully said, Louise. And that's exactly it. Because I've gone to those depths, because I've met myself in those places, my clients come to me and they aren't traumatized, right? They are scared. They are, but there's a piece of hope too of like, well, maybe this is possible, right? If she's done it, maybe I can do it too. Something speaks to them. But there's fear, right? And there's like sadness. And oftentimes they've tried different things when they come to me and they're like, okay, well, what if this doesn't work too, right? What then? And when I'm able to hold them and be like, listen, we can go to those places, right? We can access those layers. It's multifaceted, and we're going to go as deeply as you can, only as and when you're ready. No one's going to push you, no one's going to force you for anything your system is not ready for. And that's when the beauty starts to happen. Once they feel that safety, then it's like the barriers get to drop, right? The walls get to drop, the access starts to happen. And that's when you see this beautiful healing that can happen physically, mentally, emotionally, energetically. Their whole being starts to understand I'm safe. I can come back into alignment now.
Mm, I love that. And the other thing, I guess, with illness, my team is saying, we don't generally work with people who are ill, but it's a badge, isn't it? And so people know what they feel like with this badge of Crohn's, but they
Mhm,
don't know what they're going to feel like without it. And sometimes that badge is actually part of their safety as well. So giving that up, their identity is
mhm,
working itself, right? It's allowing you to say, look, listen, you're going to be okay, and
yeah.
this is what I'm like now. But people don't know that. People don't know the unknown.
Mhm.
That's what they're mainly scared of, right? The fear of not knowing. That's huge.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And coming to your point, yeah, identity is this huge piece, right? I know I'd been in that place too of like, yes, holding on so tightly, like, I have Crohn's, like my Crohn's, like it was just very, very close, right? I held it so close, like it was who I was,
Mm,
um, until I started to realize it didn't have to be that way,
mm,
right? And there was a grieving, there was a loss, like there was a whole process because it was like, this part that I thought that I was is just a part, right? It's not the whole. And
mm,
like you said, the fear of the unknown. Now, what's on the other side of that? I don't know what that looks like. I haven't been there yet, right?
mm,
And when you have someone who can guide you through that, right? To be like, you're going to be okay.
mm.
You're
Yeah.
going to be okay. Yeah, it's scary. Yeah, it's unfamiliar, but you're going to be okay. And I'm right here with you. You're
Mm,
not on your own. You're not alone going through this. Makes so much of a difference. And it starts to open you up to that possibility of what could be
mm,
as opposed to what's been. Because let's be honest, right? If what's been, what you've been so far is working and you're happy with it, then you're just going to stay there, right? There's no impetus to change. Like, why would you want to heal? But if part of you is wanting to get healthy, is wanting to recover, then it's like your soul knows, your intuition knows that there is something that is greater for you. And change is always scary,
mm,
but it's possible.
mm. I love that. You give so much hope to these. Is it just mainly women that you work with, or men as well?
I work with both. It's mainly women. I find that women have certain, hormonal challenges and just personal life challenges that I can relate to on a deeper level. But
Mm,
I do work with men as well. Yeah.
mm.
And some of my best clients have been men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of symptoms would should people be looking out into with their physical body if they're, noticing like gut issues or something's off? They know that something's off, but in this world and day and age, people don't want to go to the doctor and ask embarrassing questions to them, right? I think men are worse than that.
Mm,
But what are the things that people should be looking out for?
yeah. So bloating, right? Let's start with the easy ones. Bloating, diarrhea, constipation, um, difficulty digesting food, right? So you eat a meal and you just feel like heavy afterwards. And you may have visible bloating, right? The pregnant belly is a very common one. Your stomach was very, calm and flat, and all of a sudden it goes whoop, and like comes out like a balloon. That's a big one, right? And then there's the scary ones that people don't want to talk about, seeing mucus in your stool, right?
Mm,
Seeing blood in your stool. Like, who wants to acknowledge that? That's terrifying.
mm,
Fatigue, though, and then there's like nondescript symptoms like fatigue. You can have weird skin rashes, achiness in the joints. Like, even if you feel like your digestion's a little bit off and you have achiness in the joints, that could speak to something that's been chronic, right?
mm,
If you've, like for me, I had always thought that I had a quote unquote sensitive stomach. That's what I was told back in childhood,
mm,
and I had ulcers in the mouth and I never had the energy of the other kids and, all of this sort of stuff. Um, so those can be some of the things. If you know that you've had a diagnosis of any other autoimmune disease, I use air quotes, like it's kind of sort of a label, like ultimately the label really doesn't matter. But if you have been diagnosed with something like, say, Hashimoto's thyroiditis or rheumatoid arthritis or something like that, that means that there is that inflammation is happening in your body, right? And so that is also going to have a layer in your gut health. Even if you're not feeling symptoms per se, your gut still needs to be addressed with any kind of chronic illness sort of diagnosis. And oftentimes people come to me and they're like, just something is just not right. I'm either having bloating or I'm having constipation and then I'm having diarrhea or, I'm having hemorrhoids or pain, abdominal pain. And I've gone to this doctor and that one and the other one. And I've had these workups and no one's able to answer me. Like no one's able to tell me what's actually going on. And it's interesting because there's a lot of people who feel like having that diagnosis, right, having that label is going to give them an answer. When the reality is, if we're able to get in there and get to the root cause of what's really going on,
mm,
which has nothing to do with the diagnosis, it has nothing to do with the label. Inflammation is inflammation, right? Digestive issues are digestive issues. I don't care if you're calling it IBS, if you're calling it IBD, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, heartburn. It doesn't matter at the end of the day, right? It's what's really going on, and it's not what your mind thinks. And it's not just physical, it's so much deeper than that.
mm,
Oftentimes, this goes way back to repeated traumas that have happened back in childhood. I know trauma can be an overused word in this day and age, but it's, what were the unprocessed emotions that are being stored deep inside your tissues that are starting to manifest as physical symptoms, right? And when we go down to that level and we address what happened at that point in time and we address those repeated triggers, in addition to looking at the diet, the lifestyle, the mental health support that you need, the energy clearing, like all of those sort of things now allow you to beautifully open and start to blossom from the inside. And that has nothing to do with treating a symptom or, slapping on a band-aid for now. This is deep.
yeah, definitely. One of the things that my team want to circle back to what you said is the stories that you were told about yourself when you
Mhm.
were a child said, oh, you've got like ulcers in your mouth, you haven't got as much energy. You
Mhm.
what was the other one team? Oh, you've got a sensitive stomach, you were told.
Mhm.
We pick up so many stories about ourselves that may not even be true, right? And
Mhm.
how that manifests for us is potentially quite dangerous, right? If we just take it as fact.
Absolutely, because exactly that, right? When you really believe something, that's what you're going to manifest now over and over and over, right? So as long as I believed I had a sensitive stomach and I was going to get sick easily and my body couldn't heal, right, from this thing called Crohn's disease, that's what was going to happen. And actually, during that first surgery, I remember my GI doctor telling me at that point in time, the problem with surgery was when you have one, then you're going to tend to have repeated surgeries, right? Surgery begets surgery begets surgery. Those were his exact words. And that's exactly what I manifested until I broke the cycle and I was like, wait a second, hold up. This can be different. I'm done with this. Not on board. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my God, that's so cool. Do you work with Western doctors or do you ever get referrals from people who are doctors or how are you working with those people?
To some extent, right? So it requires someone who's very open-minded
Mm,
to the deeper things that are going on, right? So I do have, certain friends and colleagues, even from medical school, who every now and then will be like, hey, I've got this patient who's struggling, or their child is struggling, or, what have you, can you help? Of course. Um, and so, for me, I'm not going to tell a client to stay on medication or getting off medication or what have you, but I am going to help you tap into your inner wisdom, your inner guidance system, so that you know what's right for you. And it might be staying on medication for a while. I know for me it was until it wasn't, right? Until something changed inside and I was like, okay, now I'm done. And
mm,
if you get to that point, of course, I'm going to support you with that, right? But it's amazing to see what the body can do when we give it half a chance, you
mm,
know? And so it takes a Western medical doctor who's open to that, who's like, yeah, there's more to this picture than what I've learned in medical school, and I don't know everything about it. And if you can help support that, then great, let's do this together so that this patient can get better.
mm. I just think, like, I mean, we have the NHS in the UK, which is public healthcare. And I just think, like, the world would be such a different place if doctors were educated on just a tiny part of this, like energy clearing, how
Mhm.
different the world would be. And also trauma, really understanding that it starts in childhood, the way that we speak about each other and stories and all that stuff is really, really, really important. Yeah, it's not being taught yet. I feel like the children that are coming through now, I've got children, they're 6 and 8, and they're very in tune. My 6-year-old will take on the world and anyone really. And so the children that come in through now are just so bright, compared to what we had access to and what we knew. And so I do see the world shifting and changing, but there's still so much work to do, isn't there, with Western medicine?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting to see how that system is going to play out over time, like, is it going to be the way it is? Is it going to change? Is there going to be a more integrated healer that starts to come forth, right? It'll be interesting to see that play out, because
Mm,
my hope is certainly for more of that integration, for more of that deeper approach, because without addressing the traumas that happen, without addressing those deeper layers, you're never going to get to the point that you want to get to. I mean, I know I didn't, and it's just not possible, right?
mm,
It's that depth that starts to unravel your ability to heal, your ability to move forward in every sense,
yeah.
physical, mental, emotional, just even opening you up to, abundance, to creation, to manifestation, to all of that, right? So
Mm.
any lens you look at it in.
Yeah, so true. It is happening though. I get many, many downloads from my cosmic guides, and one of the reasons why we started this podcast is to start sharing people's stories on how
Mm.
they've got through their own problems, and rather than relying on modalities or outdated techniques and tactics, we're now creating our own world and our own tools, and I think that's incredible, and that's what we're witnessing now. It feels like we're at the beginning of this process of creating this new world where, like you say, everyone knows how to heal themselves rather than going to a healer. Like, how amazing would that be?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And, the other side of that too is that you don't know what you don't know, but, even with seeking out a healer, right? Is that person ultimately empowering you
Mm,
to be in touch with your own healer on a deeper level? Because part of that I feel is embodiment, right?
mm,
And I know for me, if I've met someone who's embodied something that I haven't quite accessed yet, there's value in that, right? Because being in that frequency, interacting with this person, learning some of the things that they've learned, there's going to be some wisdom there that's going to come through that's going to help me to embody what I want to embody. So there's a difference between that and the old model, right? Of I know better than you. I'm
mm.
going to teach you what you don't know, like with the finger wagging at you. It's very different energies, right? So
Yeah, I
yeah,
think so as well. I'm one of those people that if people try and put me on a pedestal, I'm just like, no, 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 no. We
yeah,
don't do that shit here.
no, no,
At all, at all. No, 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 no.
no, exactly.
Yeah, I love your approach to your work. It's really beautiful. So where's the best place for people to kind of stalk you or find out more about what you do, Dr. Selvi?
Yeah. So, my online home is my website, which is www.drselvi.com. It's drselvi.com. I'm also on Instagram at dr.selvi.coach, Facebook, my first and last name. So yeah, I mean, feel free to shoot me a DM if you have any questions. Let's connect. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, I love that. I love the work that you're doing in here and in bringing together pieces that, if you put them on the table, would be very unconventional, right, to bring together. But I think
Mhm.
that's how the world is going. We're bringing together so many pieces finally that
Yeah.
just fit well together. And I love that you're bringing all those pieces together. So such
Thank
beautiful
you.
work.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's true, and I feel like it's, like I said, the integration of those pieces that creates the magic, right? That creates that power. And it's been a process to get there, right? Of, how do I navigate both of these worlds, right? Because I still understand the Western medical world really well.
Mm,
Um, and I know the possibility and the truth that lives in the holistic health world. So, yeah.
yeah, definitely. I love that. So what we'll do is we'll include your links on the podcast so people can find you easily. Okay, and I'll thank our guests and our readers and our listeners, and then we'll have a little chat afterwards. So thank you, Dr. Selvi, and thank you to our readers and listeners.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a
You're
pleasure.
welcome. No problem.